She asked the Telegraph for 3 doses of willow bark. No one knew. It was a desperate cry for help. The desert sun beat down on the cracked boards of San Miguel's telegraph office. Isabel Herrera stepped inside, her shawl pulled tightly around her shoulders as if it could shield her from more than just the heat. The operator, a boy barely 20, looked up from his ledger when her shadow crossed the floor. She lowered her eyes and scribbled quickly on a slip of paper, 3 doses of willow bark. Her hand trembled as she passed it across the counter. To anyone else, it looked like a strange request for medicine. To Isabel, it was her mother's last gift, a code meant for desperate times, a cry for help disguised as an ordinary message. The operator hesitated. "Senora, is this urgent?" he asked, his brows knitting. Isabel only nodded, her throat too tight to answer. He tapped the key, sending the message down the line, the clicking echoing like the ticking of a clock running out. As Isabel turned to leave, her eyes caught movement in the dusty street outside. 2 of Don Ramiro Ortega's men leaned against the hitching post, their faces unreadable, their eyes fixed on her every step. Her breath caught in her chest. The message was gone, but had it reached the right hands before it was too late? Isabel didn't look back until she'd cleared the boardwalk and crossed into the narrow alley that cut behind the cantina. The alley smelled of lime peel and dishwater, copper dust and horse sweat, the familiar things of San Miguel that usually steadied her. Not today. Her pulse kept time with the memory of those clicks on the telegraph key, like little hammers striking the rim of a bell inside her skull. She tucked her shawl tighter and moved quick, her boots whispering over wind-blown grit. The cantina doors banged and laughter spilled out, rough and careless. A man sang off-key. Glasses clinked. Life went on as it always did, pretending not to notice the way Don Ramiro Ortega's shadow stretched from the grand house on the hill down into the bowels of town, pretending not to hear a woman's voice go quiet when boots stopped outside her door. Isabel turned left, then right, threading lanes she could walk blind. Past a storefront, where a seamstress propped a paper pattern in the window, a wedding bodice with puffed sleeves. Past the blacksmith with his sleeves rolled high, hammering sparks into the floor. Past the chapel whose steps were rubbed smooth by kneeling knees, whose candles burned in the day because old Dona Petra said, "We need light even when the sun is out." In each place, Isabel sensed an old rhythm, a stubborn faith, and a careful silence. People in border towns learned to survive between 2 worlds. They learned to speak in ways the powerful didn't understand. 3 doses of willow bark. Her mother's voice rose inside her, low, steady, the way she'd speak while grinding herbs with the pestle. "Listen, Higia," Mama would say. "Salguero cura a door, yes, but what if the pain is a man? Then we speak sideways. Then we hide the medicine, where only the right ears can hear it." Isabel had been 9 when Mama taught her the family codes. Little prayers in plain sight, 3 doses for immediate danger, 2 for follow at a distance, a single dose for I'm alive but watched. And the old phrase for I cannot speak, no salt this week. Her house stood on the edge of the mesquite thicket, a neat square of whitewashed adobe with a crooked fence that kept nothing out. 2 children's shirts fluttered on a line. A clay pot cooled in a shallow pan of water. Inside, the air tasted of onion and episode and wood smoke that never fully left the walls. Isabel paused at the threshold and listened. No voices, no boots on the porch. Still, she checked the corners. Habit lived in her bones now, Mom. A small voice whispered from the bedroom, and then Rafa, 8 years old with sand in his dark hair, poked his head around the curtain. Luz, barely 5, peeked from behind him, clutching the rag doll with the missing eye that she refused to let Isabel mend because she sees more like this. "You were gone long," Rafa said. He wrinkled his nose as if smelling trouble. He had his father's nose, and God help him, his father's soft heart. "I went to the market," Isabel said, the lie grainy on her tongue. She pulled them into a hug, folded them tight inside her shawl. Luz breathed against her neck, smelling of limes and sun. "Where is your tia Rosa?" "Washing at the river," Rafa said. "She told us to wait and not open the door." He pointed at the crooked latch as if to show how well he'd obeyed that impossible order. Isabel's eyes flicked to the table. A chipped cup stood alone, a visitor's cup, placed exactly where a shadow could reach it through the east window. Rosa's signal. She had seen the men outside. She had left a warning, the only kind they dared risk. "Good," Isabel said. "We keep the door closed unless it is La Tio letters. Understood?" Rafa nodded. Leo gnawed the ragdoll's hand and blinked solemnly. "Will the men come again, Mama?" "Not if we keep quiet," Isabel said. Then she knelt, looked them both in the eyes. "I might ask you to be brave tonight. Brave does not mean loud. Brave sometimes means you do exactly as I say and not one thing more." "Yes, Mama." Rafa said. Luce whispered. Sir, she set beans to simmer, added salt with a careful pinch. The ordinary work steadied her hands. On the shelf above the hearth her late husband's hat gathered dust. A good man, foolish with debts, tender with babies, blind to wolves, wearing silk vests. Ortega had smiled at the funeral like a man counting coins. He'd spoken of arrangements, of help, of obligations that lingered like smoke. The first time he set his hand on Isabel's shoulder she had felt nothing, not fear, not heat, just a cold that went through to the marrow. Since then she slept like a hunted thing. There came a soft knock, 3 quick taps, a pause, then 2, Rosa's pattern. Isabel opened the door a crack. Rosa slipped inside, hair damp from the river, sleeves rolled, jaw tight. You sent a message? Rosa asked without greeting. I did. To whom? To no one and to everyone, Isabel said. 3 doses of willow bark. Rosa's brows flew. Dios mío, es código. Are you certain? Certain enough to risk the show of it, Isabel said. They were watching. They're always watching, Rosa muttered. She crossed herself lightly. If the right ears hear it, help will come. If the wrong ones hear, she let the thought die. The operator, a boy, Isabel said. He looked worried. Mateo, Rosa supplied. He's got a clean heart. But a clean heart does not stop a dirty man. They both knew the dirty man's name. Saying it did nothing but feed it. Rosa reached into her skirt and produced a tiny twist of paper. If they come before help does, she said, lowering her voice until it was almost breath, you take the children and run for the arroyo. Follow the dry bed south, past the charred cottonwood. There is a hole in the fence behind the Pina place that only a child can find. I'll meet you there if I can. If you can, Isabel repeated, hearing the hard if in it. Her throat tightened. I won't leave you. You will if I'm the stone that breaks your ankle, Rosa said, a flash of the old fire in her eyes. Don't argue with me when the sky is already turning. As if summoned, a cloud slid across the sun and the house dimmed. The beans hissed. Somewhere beyond the mesquite, a horse tossed its head, and the bit rang cold. Isabel moved automatically. Bowls, spoons, little sips to keep children quiet. The preparation of calm, like laying out a map for a road you hope you won't have to take. Rafa, she said softly, if the door opens and it isn't Tia, you take Les beneath the bed and keep her hand yours. You count in your head, uno, dos, tres, and you do not come out until I tell you. Rafa swallowed hard. What if they call your name? Then you count louder. Inside, she said, pressing his small hand. We will make our voices small and our courage big. A new sound threaded the room, not the river, not the wind. Metal against wood, deliberate and slow, like a ring dragging across a rail. Isabel turned toward the window. A shape slid across the whitewash, the shadow of a hat brim long as a scythe. Rosa's eyes cut to the door. The latch trembled. Go, Isabel whispered, and the children vanished like rabbits. Outside, boots scuffed the porch. A knuckle rapped twice, not Rosa's pattern, not anyone's kindness. Isabel lifted her chin, feeling her mother's old codes crowd behind her teeth like prayers. The knuckle rapped a third time and the latch began to turn, slow, certain, as if the hand on it already owned everything inside. The door opened on its sigh, and the first thing Isabel saw was not a face, but a small brass badge catching the weak sun like a lying star. The brass star winked in the dim light, but Isabel knew better than to feel relief. The sheriff of San Miguel had been Ortega's man for years, a dog fattened on favors. He stepped inside with the casualness of someone entering his own home, brushing dust from his coat sleeve. Señora Herrera, Sheriff Valdez drawled, his eyes roaming the room with the cold appraisal of an auctioneer. I heard you paid the Telegraph office a visit this morning. Isabel forced her voice into something steady. I inquired after medicine. For the children. He let the lie linger in the air. His gaze slid to the bowls of beans, to Rosa standing stiff at the hearth, to the empty cup on the table. His fingers tapped the badge pinned to his chest, a steady metallic rhythm. Funny. Don Ortega tells me he keeps your family supplied. Says you've no need to be asking favors elsewhere. Isabel's skin prickled. She remembered the way Ortega smiled at her husband's funeral, that wolf's grin hidden behind polished boots and perfumed words. The children grow fast, she said. Sometimes needs change. Valdez studied her for a long moment, then stepped closer. The floorboards creaked under his weight. He lowered his voice to something meant only for her ears. A word of advice, senor. Men like Ortega don't take kindly to secrets. You keep sending odd little messages and folks might think you're, what's the word? Ungrateful. Rosa bristled. Ungrateful for what? For the debts? Ortega twisted like a noose around her neck. Careful, Rosa, Valdez cut in, his hand drifting to the revolver at his hip. Tongues have a way of cutting deeper than knives. Best you mind yours. The room went still. The beans hissed on the fire, a mocking reminder of how ordinary life tried to carry on in the middle of danger. Isabel swallowed, feeling her children's silence from the bedroom like a heartbeat under the floor. "I appreciate your concern, Sheriff," she said finally. Her voice carried a weight that surprised even her. "But I assure you, my only worry is keeping my children well." Valdez's eyes narrowed. For a heartbeat, Isabel thought he'd press harder. Then, with a slow grin that made her stomach twist, he tipped his hat. "See that you do. Don Ortega doesn't like disturbances." He lingered by the door, letting the silence stretch like a rope, then stepped out. The boards creaked again, then faded as his boots hit the dirt outside. The shadow passed from the window. Rosa exhaled sharply, the fire in her eyes now mixed with fear. "Dios mío, Isabel. If he knows, then Ortega knows. That message won't stay secret for long." Isabel's hands trembled as she gathered the bowls, trying to give her body some task so it wouldn't collapse. "Let him know," she whispered. "It's already done. The willow bark is in the air now. Someone will hear." Rosa looked at her as if weighing hope against doom. "And if no one does?" Isabel's eyes drifted to the bedroom curtain where her children hid, clutching one another. "Then we hold the door until we can't." The wind outside picked up, rattling the fence. A horse neighed sharply, followed by the muffled laugh of a man. Boots scraped against gravel, more than one pair. Isabel's stomach clenched. Valdez had not gone far, or worse, he hadn't gone alone. She froze, her breath caught in her throat. From beyond the thin walls, a voice called out low and mocking, "Open up, Senora Herrera. Don Ortega would like a word." And the rattle of the latch began again. Mateo Vega could not shake the words from his mind. 3 doses of willow bark. He had tapped them across the wire like any other message. But as the sound faded into the hum of the machine, unease lingered in his chest. He'd seen Isabel Herrera's eyes when she handed him the slip, wide and desperate, like a bird beating its wings against a cage. It wasn't the look of a woman asking for medicine. It was the look of a woman praying for rescue. The office was quiet now. Outside, San Miguel simmered in the afternoon heat. Mateo sat with his sleeves rolled up, tapping a nervous rhythm on the desk. Finally, he pushed away from the chair and strode down the dusty street. If he couldn't ignore the feeling, he had to test it. He found Dr. Morales sitting on his porch, polishing his spectacles. Morales had been in San Miguel since before the railroad came, before the town sprouted saloons and painted ladies in Ortega's empire. If anyone knew old remedies, it was him. "Doc," Mateo said, holding out the slip of paper. "Ever hear of this? 3 doses of willow bark?" Morales peered at the words, then at the young man's face. Something flickered in his expression. He set the spectacles down slowly. "Where did you see this?" "I sent it this morning," Mateo admitted, lowering his voice. "Senora Herrera asked me to," said nothing else. The old man's lips pressed tight. "Your father ever tell you about the revolt in Sonora? About the women who had to send messages under watchful eyes?" "I heard stories," Mateo said. Morales tapped the slip with one gnarled finger. "This isn't medicine, son. Not like you think. In some places they used willow bark as a cry for help. 3 doses meant immediate danger. A woman in the grip of violence, asking anyone, anywhere, to come." Mateo's pulse quickened. "You're certain?" Morales's eyes hardened. "I'm certain enough that if Don Ortega catches you talking about it, you'll be lucky to keep your tongue." A shout carried down the street. Ortega's men spilling from the cantina, laughing loud, slapping backs. But their eyes were always hunting. Mateo folded the slip quickly into his pocket. "Why would she risk it?" he asked. "Because she has no other way," Morales said. He leaned forward. "Listen, muchacha. If you care what happens to her, you'd best tread careful. Men like Ortega, they grind people into dust. And Valdez is no better. That badge of his belongs to money, not justice." Mateo clenched his jaw. He had seen enough to know it was true. And yet as he walked back toward the Telegraph office, the words kept echoing inside him. Immediate danger. Help me. That night, Mateo couldn't eat. He sat at his desk long after the sun went down, lantern light casting long shadows on the wall. The telegraph clicked now and again with routine chatter from towns up the line, but he barely heard it. His thoughts spun around Isabel's face, around the way her hand shook as she pushed the message forward. What was happening in her house at that very moment? Was she safe? Was Ortega there? A sudden knock startled him. He nearly toppled the lantern, reaching for the door. Standing outside was Capitan Alvarez, once a soldier, now a ghost of the wars. His shoulders were broad, his beard shot through with gray, his eyes sharp as broken glass. "I hear you've been sending strange medicine orders," Alvarez said without preamble. His voice was rough, like boots on gravel. Mateo froze. Who told you that? Doesn't matter. What matters is, I know what it means. And I know whose house it came from. The older man stepped closer, lowering his tone. If Isabel Herrera is crying for help, then hell's already at her door. The question is, are you willing to stand against Ortega? Because once you do, there's no going back. Mateo's throat went dry. He looked past Alvarez, down the moonlit street where Ortega's riders loitered like shadows. Fear pressed heavy on his chest. But so did the memory of Isabel's eyes. He drew a slow breath. Tell me what I need to do. Alvarez's gaze held his, measuring the boy's courage. Then he nodded once. Then listen close. Tonight, we make a plan. But even as he spoke, the telegraph machine clattered to life behind them, its frantic clicking filling the room. Mateo turned back, heart pounding. The message unfurled across the tape in uneven dots and dashes. It was a reply, short, urgent, from farther down the line. 3 doses received. Help is coming. And in the hush that followed, a gunshot cracked across the night from the direction of Isabel's house. The crack of the gunshot still rang in Isabel's ears long after the echo had fled into the mesquite, pressed her children close beneath the bed, her palms damp with their fear. The house smelled of beans gone bitter on the fire, of wood smoke that clung to the curtains, of terror thick as sweat. Outside, boots shuffled, men muttered. The sheriff's voice called once, calm as a cat, then silence. Isabel shut her eyes and saw not the present, but another night long ago. She was 9 years old again, crouched beside her mother in a tiny hut on the outskirts of Saltillo. The world beyond their walls had been dangerous then too, soldiers passing through, taking what they wished, leaving broken families behind. And her mother, Mariana Herrera, had been a healer, known for her bundles of herbs and quiet wisdom. But she was also a woman who had survived men's cruelty, who had learned that silence could be a cage as deadly as any blade. That night, as the wind rattled the shutters, she pressed Isabel's small hands around a strip of willow bark and whispered, "Medicine saves, Hijah, but so do words. We must learn to hide them where only the right hearts will see. Someday you may need to ask for help when your tongue is chained. If that day comes, you will not beg. You will not scream. You will say, 3 doses of willow bark, and those who understand will come." Isabel remembered staring at the bark, pale and rough under her childish fingers. But what if no one comes, Mama? Mariana's eyes had softened, though pain etched every line of her face. Then at least you will have tried, and you will know you did not stay silent. A tear slipped down Isabel's cheek now, years later. Her mother's codes were more than words. They were lifelines braided through generations of women forced to speak sideways, forced to bury their cries in the language of herbs, bread, and prayers. Another memory rose, her wedding day. She had been 17, wrapped in white lace borrowed from Rosa, her father's debts pressing heavy even as she smiled at her groom. Diego, her husband, had been kind but poor, always chasing the next season's harvest. The whispers had begun soon after, that Ortega offered loans no one could repay, that men who tried to resist him vanished into debts deeper than graves. Isabel remembered Diego's last night. The rain had hammered the roof, drowning their whispered fears. He had kissed her forehead, promised to meet Ortega face to face, promised to return before dawn. He never came home. Days later, Ortega had stood at her door with Valdez at his side, offering condolences that tasted like ashes. Such a shame, senor. But debts do not die with the debtor. The sound of boots outside snapped her back to the present. Luz whimpered, muffling her doll against her lips. Isabel stroked the girl's hair, whispering, "Courage, Pequega, quiet now." The door creaked again. Rosa, standing at the hearth, straightened like a soldier. She'd hidden a kitchen knife in her skirt, the steel pressing against her thigh. Her chin lifted as the latch rattled, but the door did not open. Instead, voices drifted away, fading into the night. Then the sudden thunder of hooves pounding across dirt. Men riding hard, their curses trailing like smoke. Rosa hurried to the window, peering through the slit in the curtain. "They've gone to the cantina," she whispered. "Ortega will be waiting there. Valdez, too." Isabel pulled the children from under the bed, hugging them fiercely. Relief washed through her, but it carried no comfort. She knew this was only a pause. "Mama," Rafa whispered, eyes wide. "What will we do?" Isabel pressed a kiss to his brow. Her voice was steady now, born from her mother's lessons, born from Diego's ghost, born from the cry she had sent across the wires. "We wait for the right moment, and if no one comes, then we run." The children clung to her as the wind shifted outside, carrying the faint sound of the telegraph clicking from town, too far to hear the words. but close enough to remind Isabel that her plea was already in the air. And then, faint but clear, came a whistle from the dark mesquite. 3 notes, sharp and quick. Rosa's hand tightened on the knife. "Someone's out there," she hissed. "But is it friend or foe?" The whistle cut through the night air again. 3 sharp notes, then silence. Isabel and Rosa froze, their eyes darting to the dark window. "Stay," Rosa whispered, gripping the kitchen knife. She slipped to the door and pressed her ear against the wood. The children clung to Isabel's skirt, their breath warm against her side. Every muscle in her body screamed to flee, yet her mother's voice echoed in her mind. Sometimes salvation walks in disguise. Another whistle, slower this time, deliberate. Not the drunken call of Ortega's men, not the mocking tone of Valdez. It carried something else. A signal. Rosa eased the door open just enough to peer out. A figure stood at the fence line, broad-shouldered, hat brim low, rifle slung over his back. Moonlight traced the scars across his cheek, the stiff line of his posture. Isabel felt recognition spark. Capitan Alvarez, Rosa breathed. The name was a ghost in San Miguel. Some said he had fought in the wars against the French. Others whispered he had blood debts older than the town itself. Few saw him now except in passing when he came down from the hills to buy tobacco or salt. He was a man out of time, too hard for peace, too proud for surrender. Alvarez stepped forward, boots crunching on gravel. His voice was low, steady. "Señora Herrera, I heard your message." Rosa's grip on the knife loosened, though her suspicion lingered. "How?" "The Telegraph sings to more than one set of ears," he said. "I have friends down the line who still remember old codes. They passed it on. 3 doses means danger. So I came." Isabel's chest tightened. Relief warred with doubt. "If Ortega learns you are here," Alvarez gave a humorless smile, "he already knows my name, and I know his sins." He paused, letting the weight of his words hang in the air. "He killed my brother. Left him in a ditch outside Hermosillo like a dog. I have waited a long time for the day Ortega's cruelty would corner him." Isabel exchanged a glance with Rosa. The captain's presence felt like a blade drawn from a sheath, sharp, dangerous, but perhaps aimed at the right enemy. "You cannot fight him alone," Isabel said. Alvarez nodded. "That is why I came, to ask if you will stand, and to warn you, Ortega's men won't wait long. He plans to take you to his hacienda by force. He means to break you, make an example so no woman dares whisper against him." The children whimpered, and Isabel pulled them close. Her fear burned into anger. "I will not go with him." "Then we prepare," Alvarez said simply. He stepped inside, surveying the room with a soldier's eyes. His presence filled the small house, bringing with it a strange steadiness. Rosa closed the door quickly. "Prepare how?" "He has a dozen men. The sheriff. Half the town afraid of him." Alvarez leaned his rifle against the wall. "Fear is a chain. But I've seen chains break. Ortega's men are loyal to his coin, not his soul. If the people see him bleed, they'll remember he is flesh and not a god." Mateo's words from earlier that night echoed in Isabel's head. "If you care what happens, you must stand." She looked at the captain, at Rosa, at her children. "Tell me what to do." Alvarez studied her, the weight of her resolve plain in her eyes. "We'll use the arroyo south of town. If we can get you there with the children, we'll have ground Ortega doesn't know. But we'll need more than one rifle." Rosa crossed her arms. "The men in town won't fight. They're too scared." The captain's gaze was grim. "Not if we ask them. If we remind them that Ortega has stolen from every one of them, broken families, taken land, crushed debts into graves. He has made enemies. Tonight, we gather them." Isabel's heart pounded. For years, she had prayed only for survival, for a roof that did not fall, for her children's next meal. But tonight was different. Tonight survival would mean standing, not hiding. Alvarez slung the rifle back over his shoulder. "I'll go to the cantina. Men talk big there with whiskey in their bellies. I'll see if they have the stomach to back their words. Rosa, you keep watch here. Señora Herrera." His eyes met Isabel's. "Pack nothing but what your children can carry on their backs. Be ready when I return." He stepped into the night without another word. The silence he left behind pressed heavy. Isabel gathered the children close, whispering comfort she barely believed herself. Rosa stood at the window, knife in hand, staring at the dark road that led to the beans hissed on the fire again, the only ordinary sound left. Then faintly from the direction of town came another noise. Raised voices, chairs scraping, glass shattering. The cantina was already awake. The house seemed to shrink as the night pressed in. Isabel sat at the edge of the bed, her children curled against her sides, listening to every sound outside. The mesquite branches scratched against the walls like fingers. Somewhere down the road a dog barked and then yelped into silence. Rosa paced the floor, the kitchen knife never leaving her hand. Her voice was a whisper, harsh and quick. "Alvarez is risking his life at that cantina. If the wrong ear hears him, Ortega will have him strung from a beam before dawn." Isabel stroked loose his hair, though her own hands trembled. He said, "We must be ready. That means we wait." But waiting was a prison. Every heartbeat brought footsteps closer. Every silence carried the weight of dread. Near midnight the knock came, heavy, demanding. Not the cautious tap of a friend, but the iron hand of command. "Señora Herrera." A voice boomed through the door. It was Valdez, the sheriff. "Don Ortega requests your company. He expects you to be ready to travel." Rosa stiffened. Isabel felt her children clutch tighter. She forced her breath even, then rose and opened the door only a crack. The sheriff's lantern cast long shadows across his face. Behind him stood two of Ortega's men, their rifles glinting in the light. "Travel where?" Isabel asked, her voice flat. Valdez's smile was cruel. "To Ortega's hacienda. He has business across the border, and he wants you at his side." "A widow should be grateful for such attention," Rosa hissed like a lamb to slaughter. Valdez ignored her. "You'll pack what you need. We ride within the hour." Isabel's stomach clenched. She could see the trap closing. If she refused, they would drag her. If she obeyed, Ortega would own her completely. Her mother's code had gone out. Alvarez had promised to return, but time was slipping like sand through her fingers. Valdez leaned closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "Be wise, Señora. He can be generous to those who bend. But if you resist, your little ones may suffer for your pride." Isabel's blood turned to ice. Behind the doorframe she felt Luz's tiny fingers tighten around her skirt. Rosa stepped forward, her knife flashing in the lamplight. "Over my dead body." Valdez chuckled, unbothered. "That can be arranged." He nodded to the men. 1 hour. If she's not ready, we burn this house to the ground. The lanterns swung as they turned, their shadows stretching monstrous across the dirt. Isabel closed the door and leaned against it, her breath ragged. Rosa spat on the floor. "We can't let them take you." Isabel gathered her children, her mind racing. Her mother's voice returned. "If no one comes, you must run." But how? With the men waiting outside, with Ortega himself expecting her. She went to the small chest at the foot of the bed, pulled it open, and began packing clothes for the children. Bread, dried beans, the rag doll. Her hands moved quickly, automatically, even as her heart cracked. Rafa whispered, "Mama, are we leaving?" "Yes," Isabel said softly, "but not the way they think." Rosa gripped her arm. "You'll never make it on foot, not with them outside." "We will if the arroyo is still clear," Isabel answered. Her voice was steady now, carved from desperation. "Alvarez said there was a hole in the fence. If he returns, good. If not, then we go alone." The beans hissed again on the fire, as if mocking their fragile plans. Outside the horses snorted, impatient. A man's laugh split the night, cruel, and Isabel's children clung to her skirt as the weight of the moment pressed down. And then, sliding under the crack of the door, came a folded scrap of paper. Isabel froze, heart hammering. She bent and picked it up. In the flicker of the firelight she read the words, scrawled in a soldier's hand, "Aguanta. Te escuchamos. Esta noche." "Hold on. We hear you. Tonight." Her breath caught. Alvarez had reached someone. Help was real, not just a hope carried on wires. But before relief could root, another sound rolled across the night, the chilling neigh of Ortega's stallion as he arrived, his voice booming through the darkness. "Bring her out. Now." The cantina was alive with smoke, laughter, and lies. Empty glasses clinked, boots stomped the floorboards, and a crooked tune wheezed out of a battered accordion. But beneath the noise, Capitan Alvarez's voice carried steady as a drum. He stood near the bar, his presence impossible to ignore. Scarred cheek, soldier's stance, eyes that burned like coals pulled from a fire. He spoke not with whiskey's slur, but with the weight of memory. "Every man here has felt Ortega's hand," Alvarez said, letting the words fall heavy. "He taxed your crops until your children went hungry. He took your land with forged deeds. He shackled you to debts that could never be paid. He broke Diego Herrera, left him cold in a ditch, and now he comes for Diego's widow." The cantina stilled. Men who had been laughing moments before shifted uneasily, staring into their glasses as if answers lay in the dregs. From the corner Mateo pushed forward, his young face pale but determined. "She sent a cry for help," he said. "Through the wires. 3 doses of willow bark. My father told me what it meant. Desperate danger. If we let Ortega take her tonight, we tell our wives and daughters that their pain is worthless." A murmur rippled across the room. Some shook their heads. Others muttered, "She's only one woman. Ortega has the sheriff. He'll kill us all." Alvarez slammed his palm against the bar. The bottles rattled. "And how many graves will it take before you remember you are men?" His voice thundered. "Ortega has ruled because you've let fear turn your backs. But fear is nothing when it burns away in fire. I've faced armies greater than Ortega and lived to see them scatter." One man stood, Manuel Espina, a farmer with dirt still under his nails. "My son starved last winter, while Ortega's storehouses burst with grain. I swore I'd never raise a hand against him. But maybe that oath was just another chain." Another voice rose. "He took my sister to work his kitchens and she never came home, and he put my brother in jail over a peso debt." The murmurs grew into shouts. Shoulders straightened, fists clenched. A storm was gathering. Mateo's heart pounded. He had never led men, never raised a gun in anger, but tonight words were weapons. "If we all stand," he said, his voice cracking but strong, "he cannot own us anymore." Alvarez scanned the room, measuring. Then he raised his hand. "Those who will stand, meet me at the edge of the arroyo when the moon is high. Bring what you have, rifles, knives, your courage. Tonight we do not bend." The men exchanged looks. One by one, they nodded. Some slapped their hands against the bar in grim agreement. Fear was still there, but it was laced with something sharper now, defiance. Mateo exhaled, his chest tight with both terror and hope. For the first time, the balance felt as though it might shift. Alvarez clapped a heavy hand on his shoulder. "You've done well, boy. Now comes the hard part." But even as the men began to disperse, shadows moved outside the cantina windows. The scrape of boots, the glint of rifles and lantern light. Ortega's men were watching. Alvarez cursed under his breath. Too soon. They know. The accordion wheezed to a halt. Conversations died mid-sentence. The cantina held its breath. Then a voice rang out from the street, sharp as a whip. "No one leaves until Don Ortega has his answer." The doors banged open, and a half-dozen riders poured in, rifles ready. The leader grinned, his teeth gold in the lamplight. "The patron wants the widow tonight. Who here thinks they can stop him?" Every eye in the room flicked to Alvarez, to Mateo, to Manuel, and the others whose anger had just been kindled. And Isabel's fate balanced on the edge of a single decision. The stallion's neigh split the night like a warning bell. Isabel froze, clutching her children, her ears filled with the sound of Ortega's booming voice outside. "Bring her out, now!" Lise whimpered into her mother's skirt. Rafa's small fists clenched, as though his tiny body could hold back the storm at the door. Rosa braced herself, jaw tight, knife gleaming in her hand. Isabel forced herself to breathe. Panic was useless. She remembered her mother's words, "When the walls close in, make your silence into a shield and your steps into a blade." If she faltered, her children would have no tomorrow. The pounding on the door grew heavier, rattling the latch. "Do not test me," Ortega's voice thundered, "or this house will be nothing but ash before dawn." Rosa hissed, "We can't hold them long." "If Alvarez doesn't come, then we run," Isabel cut in, steady now, as if the decision itself had hardened her blood. She grabbed the small bundle she had prepared, bread, beans, a flask of water, and slung it over her shoulder. Then she crouched, her hands firm on her children's shoulders. "Rafa, Lise, listen to me. When I tell you, we go out the back. Quiet, fast, no looking back. Do you understand?" Rafa swallowed. "Yes." Mama Luz nodded, her eyes wide but resolute. The door shuddered again, a crack splintering in the wood. Ortega's men jeered, voices thick with cruelty. Isabel's heart hammered, but her hands were steady as she pushed the children toward the back door. "Now!" she whispered. Rosa flung the back door open, and the night swallowed them. The cool air hit Isabel's face like a slap as they darted into the mesquite shadows, their feet barely making a sound in the dry dirt. Crickets chirped, masking their escape. Behind them, the front door finally gave way with a crash. Ortega's men stormed inside, shouting curses when they found the rooms empty. "She's gone," one bellowed. Isabel didn't look back. She pushed her children ahead, Rosa at her side, the bundle thumping against her hip. Every branch that scraped her shawl felt like a hand grabbing for her. The arroyo was close, a dry riverbed that cut through the land like a scar. If they could reach it, maybe they could vanish into its twists and shadows. Rafa tripped on a rock but scrambled up again, grit in his teeth. Luz clung to her doll, silent tears streaking her cheeks. Isabel urged them on, whispering, "Courage, Pequegos." Just a little farther. A whistle pierced the dark, 3 sharp notes. Isabel's heart leapt. Alvarez? Or was it a trap? Rosa raised the knife, scanning the brush. Then, from the shadows, a figure emerged. Broad shoulders, rifle slung over his back. Alvarez's scarred face caught the moonlight. Quickly he rasped, "This way." Isabel almost collapsed with relief. They plunged into the arroyo, the captain leading them down its sandy bed. The earth walls rose high, muffling the noise of pursuit, but the safety was fleeting. Behind them, the pounding of hooves grew louder. Ortega himself was riding hard, his stallions snorting fire. His men fanned out, torches blazing, casting monstrous shadows along the arroyo's rim. Alvarez cursed under his breath. "They're faster than I hoped." He knelt, checking his rifle. "I'll buy you time." "No," Isabel hissed, gripping his arm. "We run together. There's no running if they catch us in the open," he said. His scarred face softened, just a fraction. "I swore I'd never fail a family. Go. Follow the arroyo south until you see a cottonwood split by lightning. There's a fence with a gap. You'll be safe beyond it." Rosa pulled Isabel's arm. "We can't waste a second." A gunshot cracked overhead, dirt spraying their faces. Ortega's men had spotted them. Shouts rained down, torches burning like angry stars against the dark sky. Isabel tightened her grip on her children. Her heart screamed to stay, to fight, but her duty was clear. She dragged them forward, Rosa at her side, the arroyo twisting beneath their feet. Behind them, Alvarez raised his rifle and fired, the blast echoing through the canyon. A man screamed, a horse reared. Another shot rang out. Then Ortega's voice boomed above all others, furious and close. "Run, little widow. Run while you can, because there is no hole in this desert deep enough to hide you from." The arroyo twisted like a snake through the desert, its high clay walls sheltering Isabel and her children for a few precious moments. Their footsteps sank into the soft sand, hearts pounding as they stumbled forward. Rosa kept glancing over her shoulder, knife flashing in her fist, while Alvarez's rifle thundered again and again, each shot echoing like judgment in the night. But Ortega's riders were relentless. Torches flared along the rim of the arroyo, firelight throwing monstrous shadows across the walls. Hooves drummed above them, closer with every heartbeat. Isabel's lungs burned, but she pulled Rafa and Liz onward, whispering encouragement through her ragged breath. "Keep going, Picagos. Just a little more. Brave like your Papa Alvarez." Reloaded quickly, teeth gritted. "We can't outrun horses down here. They'll cut us off at the bend." "Then where?" Rosa demanded. He pointed ahead. "There's a dry ledge. If we climb it, we might lose them in the mesquite. Go." They scrambled toward the rock face, the children boosted by Isabel's trembling arms. Rosa shoved Isabel upward, whispering, "Climb, hermana, climb." But before they could reach the top, Ortega's men appeared at the curve behind them, dark figures with rifles raised, firelight licking their steel. "Stop!" one bellowed. Isabel froze, shielding her children with her body. Rosa raised her knife, defiance etched into her face. Alvarez swung his rifle into position, and then from the rim above, Ortega himself appeared. His stallion pawed at the edge of the arroyo, casting a long shadow over the sand. His hat brim hid his eyes, but his voice carried like thunder. "Señora Herrera," he called, "you shame yourself running like a thief. Do you think you can defy me and live?" His men closed in, rifles aimed. Alvarez fired once, dropping a rider, but another shot cracked back, striking sparks off the rock inches from Rosa's head. Leah screamed. Rafa clung tighter to his mother. "Enough games," Ortega barked. "Hand her over, or I'll spill blood on this sand until it runs like a river." Alvarez stood between Isabel and the rifles, shoulders squared, scarred face carved in fury. "You'll bleed first, Ortega." The patron laughed coldly. "1 man against 10. You've grown old, Capitan. Your war is done." But it was Isabel who stepped forward, pulling herself upright despite the trembling in her legs. She met Ortega's shadowed gaze, her voice steady, carrying across the arroyo. "You murdered my husband. You enslaved this town with your lies. You will not take me." Her words silenced even the crickets. For a heartbeat, all that existed was the hiss of torches and the sharp pull of fear. Ortega leaned in the saddle, his grin cruel. "Brave words, widow, but I don't need your tongue to own you." He lifted his revolver, pointing it straight at Isabel's chest. Rosa gasped. Rafa cried out. Alvarez tightened his grip on the rifle, but there were too many guns aimed back at him. And just as Ortega's finger curled on the trigger, a rifle shot cracked from the shadows of the mesquite. The torch nearest Ortega exploded into sparks, plunging half the arroyo into sudden darkness. Men shouted, startled. Horses reared. Another shot followed, then another, not from Alvarez, but from somewhere unseen. Alvarez's eyes widened. "They came," he whispered. Ortega cursed, wheeling his stallion back. "Find them," he roared to his men. The night erupted into chaos, rifles barking, torches falling, shadows lunging. Isabel grabbed her children, pulling them down against the sand as bullets whined overhead. Rosa clutched her knife, eyes wild. Alvarez fired into the confusion, his voice a command. "Run, Isabel, run now!" But the widow could not move. Ortega's stallion reared on the rim above, silhouetted against the firelight, his revolver still fixed on her. Even with chaos swirling, his focus did not waver. And Isabel realized with a chill he meant to kill her here, before the town could rise. Gunfire cracked across the arroyo, echoing like thunder between the clay walls. Men shouted, torches fell, and the night turned to chaos. Isabel pressed Rafa and Leas against the sand, covering their small bodies with her own, as Rosa crouched nearby, knife flashing with every burst of light. From above, Ortega's stallion screamed and reared, his rider silhouetted like a devil carved against the firelit sky. And even in the pandemonium, Ortega's revolver never wavered. It was still trained on Isabel, his teeth bared in a grin that looked more like a snarl. "You think these peasants can save you?" he shouted over the din. "You are mine, Isabel. Every debt your husband left binds you to me. Do you understand? His grave did not pay what he owed." Alvarez fired back from behind a fallen boulder, dropping one of Ortega's men. "Diego owed nothing," the captain roared. "You killed him to make the debt permanent." Ortega's laugh cut through the night. "And what of it? A man who cannot pay, a man who dares stand against me, he pays with his life. But his widow?" His grin widened. "She pays with her obedience." Isabel's stomach twisted, rage burning hotter than fear. She forced herself to stand, though her knees trembled. "You lie. Diego was an honest man. You murdered him because you could not own him." Ortega leaned forward in the saddle, voice carrying like a sermon. "No, widow. I murdered him because he would not bend, and now his death makes you mine. Every coin, every acre, every breath you draw belongs to me. Even your children carry his debt." The words struck like blows. Rosa hissed through her teeth, eyes wide with fury. "Maldito, you dare threaten children. Children grow into enemies," Ortega sneered. "Better to break 'em young, to teach them where power lies." The men around him shifted uneasily. Even in the firelight, Isabel saw doubt flicker across their faces. His cruelty was naked now, spilling like blood in front of them all. Alvarez shouted back, his voice cutting through the clamor. "Hear him, hombres. Hear what he says. He claims to own even your children. Do you bow to that?" A murmur rippled through Ortega's own riders. For the first time, Isabel sensed the chain of fear loosening, link by link. But Ortega's eyes snapped with fury. He raised his revolver higher, aiming squarely at Isabel's heart. "Enough talk. If fear will not bind you, then death will." Rafa cried out, "Mama!" Lise clutched her ragdoll, eyes wide with terror. Isabel's breath slowed. Every part of her screamed to run, but her mother's words steadied her. "If silence kills, then speak. Speak so others cannot close their ears." She stepped forward into the open, her voice carrying clear as a bell across the arroyo. "3 doses of willow bark?" she cried. "Do you hear me? 3 doses. Help me now." The words tore from her throat, raw and fearless. The gunfire seemed still for an instant. Faces turned. The code, passed from mother to daughter, leapt into the open at last. Alvarez's men, hidden among the mesquite, answered with a volley of rifle fire. Ortega's riders reeled, horses panicking, torches falling. But Ortega did not flinch. His finger tightened on the trigger, the revolver aimed squarely at Isabel. And with a voice like venom, he spat the truth meant to shatter her. "We'll never be free, because I am the law here, and I own even the silence you break." The hammer clicked, the shot thundered. The revolver's blast split the night like lightning. Isabel flinched, bracing for the pain that would end her world. But when she opened her eyes, she was still standing. The bullet had struck the clay wall behind her, showering her with dust. Alvarez's shot had come a heartbeat sooner, knocking Ortega's revolver off aim. Sparks flew as the bullet glanced against the stallion's bit. The horse screamed, rearing, nearly unseating its rider. "Now!" Alvarez bellowed. From the mesquite, rifles roared in unison. Men of San Miguel, farmers, herders, shopkeepers, poured into the arroyo rim. Manuel Espina led them, wielding an old hunting rifle, his face streaked with resolve. Behind him, half the cantina's patrons shouted curses that turned into war cries. Ortega's riders, caught between loyalty and fear, faltered. Some fired blindly into the shadows, others pulled their mounts back. The sudden tide of gunfire broke their swagger. Isabel clutched her children, pulling them behind a boulder. Rosa crouched beside her, knife still in hand, but her eyes shone. They came, hermana. Dios mío, they truly came. The sheriff, Valdez, scrambled into view, shouting above the chaos. Hold the line. Protect the patron. But his voice cracked, and when he raised his pistol, a bottle from the cantina smashed against his hand. He howled, stumbling back as the crowd pressed forward. Ortega, still in the saddle, roared like a wounded beast. Traitors, all of you. I made this town and I can burn it to ashes. But his words only stoked the fury. A woman hurled a stone from the rim, striking his shoulder. Another man shouted, "You took my sister." Another, "You starved my son." The grievances poured like floodwater, drowning the fear that had held them silent for years. Alvarez fired again, dropping another of Ortega's men. "Stand with us," he shouted to the wavering riders. "He cannot buy back your souls." Two of the men lowered their rifles, backing their horses away. Another spurred off into the night. The chain of loyalty was breaking link by link. In the chaos, Isabel rose. For the first time in years, her voice carried not just in whispers, but like a bell. "He killed Diego. He killed others. How many more graves before we stop him?" The townsfolk answered with a roar. Shots cracked, torches fell, and Ortega's force scattered like dry leaves in a storm. But Ortega himself did not run. His stallion wheeled in fury, his eyes burning. He aimed the revolver again, teeth bared. "You will kneel, Isabel, or I will kill you in front of them all." Isabel's knees trembled, but she did not. She lifted her chin, clutching Rafa and Luz to her side. "We will never kneel." The words struck the crowd like a match on tinder. Men surged forward, shouting, firing, throwing rocks. Women joined, wielding sticks and farm tools. For the first time, Ortega's power cracked not from a bullet, but from the voices of those he had silenced. Alvarez raised his rifle, sighting on Ortega's chest. But before he could fire, Ortega dug his spurs into the stallion and charged straight into the arroyo. Sand flew as hooves thundered toward Isabel and the children. Alvarez shouted, "Isabel, move!" She grabbed her children, stumbling back as the stallion bore down, Ortega's revolver flashing in his hand. And then Rosa stepped forward, knife raised, planting herself in the beast's path. The stallion's eyes rolled white, the knife glinting inches from its chest, and Ortega roared in fury. The stallion thundered forward, Ortega's revolver raised high, his face twisted in rage. Rosa stood her ground, knife flashing under the torchlight, her body a frail shield before Isabel and the children. "Rosa, no!" Isabel screamed, but her sister's feet dug into the sand. The horse reared at the last moment, hooves striking sparks against stone. Ortega slashed downward with the butt of his revolver, the blow glancing Rosa's temple. She crumpled, knife spinning from her hand, into the dirt. "Tia!" Rafa cried, trying to rush forward, but Isabel yanked him back. Ortega wheeled his horse, towering above them, revolver once again leveled at Isabel's chest. His voice rang through the chaos, every word a curse. "You think you can shame me before my own men? You think you can make them rise against me? You're nothing, widow. Nothing but debt and weakness. I will put you in the ground beside your husband and salt the earth above you." His finger tightened on the trigger, but Isabel did not cower. With Rosa unconscious at her feet and her children clutching her skirts, she stepped forward, her voice sharp as steel. "3 doses of willow bark," she cried again, louder than the gunfire, louder than her fear. "Do you hear me? Help me now." The code carried across the arroyo, a cry older than the town, a cry her mother had whispered into her childhood. This time, it did not vanish into silence. The townsfolk answered with a roar. Manuel Espina and half a dozen others charged into the arroyo, swinging rifles and shovels. Rocks and bullets rained toward Ortega. His stallion screamed and bucked, nearly throwing him. Alvarez, crouched behind a boulder, rose and fired. The shot ripped the hat from Ortega's head, grazing his cheek. Blood streamed down, but still he did not fall. Instead, Ortega laughed, a sound wild and broken. "You can kill my men, you can curse my name, but without me you are nothing. I am San Miguel." "No," Isabel shouted back, her voice fierce, carrying over the chaos. "San Miguel is us." Her words broke something deeper than rifles. Ortega's remaining riders faltered. One dropped his weapon. Another turned his horse and fled into the desert. Fear, once their master, now belonged to Ortega alone. He saw it in their faces, saw the rebellion blazing in the eyes of the very people he had ruled. And in that moment, his fury burned hotter. "You think you've won?" he spat, eyes locked on Isabel. "Then I'll take what you love most." He twisted in the saddle, aiming the revolver, not at Isabel, but at Rafa, who clung to her side. "No!" Isabel screamed, throwing herself in front of her son. The revolver barked, fire and smoke exploding in the night. The revolver's blast tore through the night. echoing off the arroyo walls like thunder from a storm. Isabel's body twisted as she threw herself in front of Rafa. For an endless heartbeat, the world slowed. She braced for pain, for fire ripping through her chest, but the bullet never struck her. Alvarez's rifle barked at the same instant, his shot slamming into Ortega's arm. The patroness revolver spun from his hand, clattering into the sand. The stallion reared, screaming, nearly throwing its rider. Rosa groaned on the ground, blood streaking her temple, but her eyes fluttered open just in time to see Isabel alive, clutching her children close. Relief and fury mingled in her broken whisper. He missed. Gracias a Dios. Around them, the townsfolk surged like a flood breaking through a dam. Manuel Espina and others stormed into the arroyo, swinging shovels and firing rifles. Cries of vengeance rose into the smoke-filled night. Ortega wrestled the reins, forcing his stallion to steady, his face twisted in pain and disbelief. "Traitors," he roared. "All of you. I fed you, gave you land, gave you stole." Someone shouted back. "Starved." Another screamed. "You killed our children." The voices built into a chorus of rage, drowning Ortega's words. His power, the silence he had demanded for years, was shattering. Valdez, the sheriff, tried to rally, pistol shaking in his hand. "Stand with the patron. He'll hang every last one of you." But when he aimed his gun at Manuel, a farmer's bullet caught him in the chest. Valdez fell face first into the dust, badge glinting in the firelight like the last lie of his life. Alvarez advanced, rifle aimed steady at Ortega. "It's over. You will not leave this arroyo alive." Ortega's eyes darted wildly. His riders were gone, fled, or fallen. His men lay scattered in the sand. All around him, townsfolk pressed in, fury in their eyes, their silence finally broken. He spat blood, gripping his wounded arm. "You think killing me will free you? Another will come. There is always another." Isabel stepped forward, children clinging to her skirt. Her voice was calm, steady, cutting through the storm. "Maybe, but tonight it ends with you." Alvarez's finger tightened on the trigger, but Ortega was not finished. With a sudden snarl, he yanked a hidden pistol from his boot, aiming at Isabel. His lips curled into a last venomous grin. The crowd shouted. Alvarez lunged. Isabel gasped. A shot cracked. Ortega jerked in the saddle, eyes wide, then toppled from his horse, crashing into the sand. The pistol fell from his limp fingers. The smoking rifle belonged not to Alvarez, but to Manuel Espina, his hands trembling as he lowered the barrel. "For my boy," he whispered. The arroyo fell silent except for Ortega's ragged breaths. He writhed in the dirt, blood darkening his fine coat, his eyes wild as he searched for someone, anyone, to kneel. But no one moved. The stallion pawed the ground, then bolted into the desert, free of its master. Ortega groaned, reaching weakly for the revolver in the sand. Isabel stepped forward and planted her boot firmly on his hand, pressing until the pistol slipped away. He stared up at her, bloodied and beaten, his voice little more than a rasp. You were nothing." Her eyes blazed. "And nothing just defeated you." The crowd erupted. Voices rose in a storm. Cheers, cries, sobs of relief. Torches flared bright, casting Ortega's broken body in a glow he could no longer command. The man who had ruled with fear lay crushed beneath the people he had despised. Alvarez lowered his rifle, his gaze heavy but certain. San Miguel is free. Isabel gathered Rofa and Lias into her arms, Rosa leaning against her shoulder. For the first time in years, her chest filled with breath unchained by fear. But as Ortega groaned one last time, the widow knew the night was not finished, because a tyrant rarely dies quietly. Ortega lay sprawled in the arroyo dust, blood soaking into the sand, his breath a wet rattle. The torches cast long shadows across his broken figure, every flicker of flame a reminder that his reign was burning out. Yet still, even on the ground, he glared upward with a twisted defiance. "You think this changes anything?" he croaked, spitting blood. "Kill me, and another will take my place. Fear is stronger than hope. Fear always wins." The crowd shifted uneasily, but Isabel stepped forward, her children at her side. Rosa leaned heavily on her, a hand pressed to the cut on her temple, but her eyes burned with the same fire. "No," Isabel said, her voice steady, carrying across the arroyo. "Fear lives only as long as we feed it with silence. And tonight, silence dies." Her words struck deeper than bullets. The townsfolk pressed closer, their faces lit by torchlight, their anger forged into courage. Mothers who had lost daughters, fathers who had buried sons, farmers who had starved while Ortega's storehouses overflowed. Their voices rose in a chant, not of terror but of defiance. Nunca ems, never again. Ortega clawed at the sand, trying to rise, his eyes darting like a cornered animal. He reached once more for the revolver, but Isabel's boot came down hard on his wrist. She looked into his eyes, her face unflinching. "This is not your town anymore," she whispered. Alvarez stepped forward, rifle raised. For a moment, it seemed he would deliver the final blow. But then he lowered the barrel and looked to the people. "This choice belongs to San Miguel. His power was built on your silence. His end must be built on your voices." The townsfolk surged closer. Manuel Espina, tears cutting through the dust on his face, stepped into the circle and leveled his rifle. "For my boy," he said again, voice breaking. "No." Isabel stopped him with a raised hand. She turned to the crowd. "Blood has spilled enough. Killing him is too quick. Let him face the justice he denied to others. Let him live to hear our voices rise every day without." The crowd murmured, torn between vengeance and the dignity Isabel offered. But Ortega, beaten and furious, snarled, "You cannot cage me. I will rise again. I will burn your houses, take your children, and salt your fields." Alvarez's voice thundered, "Not tonight." With that, he struck Ortega across the head with the butt of his rifle. The patron crumpled, unconscious, his words silenced at last. A cry rose from the people, cheers, sobs, prayers whispered into the night sky. Torches lifted high, their flames a beacon of freedom. For the first time in years, San Miguel's air felt lighter, as if the desert itself sighed in relief. Isabel fell to her knees, gathering Rafa and Luz into her arms. Rosa knelt beside her, pressing her forehead against Isabel's. "You did it, Hermana. You broke the chain." Alvarez looked at Isabel, his scarred face softened by respect. "No, you did. One woman's cry for help was enough to rattle the silence of a town. Never forget that." Isabel closed her eyes, holding her children tight. Her mother's words echoed once more. "If silence kills, then speak." She had spoken, and the world had answered. The night stretched quiet now, broken only by the crackle of torches and the whisper of wind. Above them, the stars shone sharp and endless, like a sky scrubbed clean of shadows. Isabel rose, her children at her side, her sister leaning on her arm. She turned to the crowd and spoke the words that would mark this night forever. "Never again will we bow. Never again will we be silent. This town belongs to its people, not to a tyrant." The cheer that followed shook the desert. San Miguel had found its voice. And Isabel, the widow who had once whispered a coded cry for help, stood at the center of it all, not as a victim, but as a symbol of liberation. How many voices, like Isabel's, are still silenced by fear? This story reminds us that courage is not the absence of fear, but the choice to speak when silence would destroy us. And you, have you ever faced a moment when you had to turn your voice into strength? Share your experience in the comments. We would love to hear your story. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories like this one.